Okay. Okay, three, two, one, let's go live. Hi, my name is Luke Seaward, and welcome to the Toolbox for Therapists with a presentation called The Art of Self-Care. And this is take two because I've already started the first 15 minutes or so, or 10 minutes, but here we go. So I want to begin with a quote that I think you should be familiar with, but let's see if we can revisit this quote. It says, "You cannot pour from an empty cup." And this is so very, very true. I think a lot of people in the healthcare profession try this, and what they end up with is compassion fatigue. So self-care basically is learning to refill your cup. And that's what we're here all about tonight, is to take time for ourselves. There's a picture of my wife. She has no idea she's in the slide presentation. A lot of people think this is what self-care is, and to be honest, this is a part of it. It's not the whole thing. By the way, she gave permission to use a slide, so she thought it was pretty funny. And also, massages. That's also what people think of immediately when they think of self-care, is taking some time for yourself. And this is important, and it's very, very good to do, but that's not all that self-care is. But let's take a look at what some people define self-care as. This is from the World Health Organization, and they say this: the ability of individuals, families, and communities to promote health, prevent disease, maintain health, and to cope with illness and disability with or without the support of a healthcare provider. That sounds kind of like very inclusive for everything. Let's take a closer look at something a little more germane to what I think is used by the healthcare industry, nurses, but also for therapists as well. It says self-care is the intentional time taken by an individual to nurture oneself physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually on a daily basis. And we probably should underline on a daily basis, because the times we're living in, this is actually very essential. I came across one more definition. This was a meme on Facebook. It says self-care is choosing not to argue with people who are committed to misunderstanding you. And that, I think, is very true too. So if you talk to the shamans, the sages, the wisdom keepers, and the healers of all times, all cultures, all languages, and ask them, what is this concept of wellness all about? You're going to hear them say this: mind, body, spirit, emotions. And this is the wellness paradigm that we want to pay attention to with regards to self-care. We want to give self-care to all four quadrants, not just this one, which is the easiest to do, with massages and hot baths and things. That's the most obvious that the people refer to, but self-care really is the whole picture, and we want to make sure we include the spiritual being aspect as well. So my question to you is, how is your self-care? And if you're in the typical population of a therapist, probably not so good. We tend to actually pour from an empty cup to the point where we get exhausted and we can't function very well. So this is a time to regain our personal composure and our sovereignty. So we're in times of great stress, no surprise there. But now, when people who are working in the front lines of healthcare, like yourselves, see stress on a regular basis with your clientele, we tend to pick that up. And this actually adds to more of the draining of personal energy too. So we want to have a good, healthy boundary with that. So I got a list of about 10 things that are pretty commonly known in terms of the art of self-care. So let's go through some of these. And again, it's common sense. But the first one says practice healthy boundaries. And it's so very important to do, because if you don't, then you're going to end up with a sense of victimization. So just to kind of review, healthy boundaries provide structure and quite often stability in our lives. We need to have healthy boundaries. Otherwise, we're going to have a loss of integrity. Healthy boundaries is really code for appropriate behaviors, and this would include everything from eating habits to screen technology habits to sleep habits to how we deal with other people, family and friends, financial habits, you name it, across the board. Everything is fair game for healthy boundaries. But in this case here, self-care in itself is a category for healthy boundaries, taking time for yourself. And it's not conceited, it's not arrogant, it's not egotistical. It is essential for healthcare practitioners to do this, especially when you're hearing other people's problems all day long. So, healthy boundaries. Here's a cell membrane. Just to review, every cell in your body has a membrane. And this membrane, as Bruce Lipton says, is the intelligence of the cell, because it allows things to come in and things to stay in and things to go out and things to keep out. So you want to have basically good structure, but you also want to have some flexibility, because if you're rigid, then that's no good either. So the idea for cell membrane is much like your idea of healthy boundaries, that you put up healthy boundaries so that you don't get walked all over, and you don't have things come in that don't belong to you, that end up affecting your health and well-being. So in simple terms, and this is all reduced to simple terms, there are three kinds of behavior. There is passive. Those are the people that get walked over. And there's aggressive. Those are the people doing the walking over. And then there's assertive, and that would be you. We want you to be assertive, where you have healthy boundaries and you learn to say no or say not now as you take time for yourself. Otherwise, you'll have no energy, and then that leads back to victimization. I saw this meme on Facebook I thought I'd share with you. It says, boundaries. If someone throws a fit because you set boundaries, is just one more bit of evidence the boundary was needed. And how about this one here? The only people who get upset about you setting boundaries are the ones who are benefiting from you not having any. So there's a wonderful phrase from Gandhi, who says, first they mock you, then they ignore you, then they accept you. And if you set up boundaries that people now are meeting up against, they're going to start making fun of you. And then at some point, they're going to realize they can't get in. They'll go try and walk over somebody else. But at some point, they might come back to you and say, what's your secret? You've changed, and I want to be like you. And that's where the acceptance comes in. So you've got to not only have good boundaries, which really is also another way to describe a course correction in your life, but you also want to administer those boundaries so that they stay in position, don't get knocked over. So, creating healthy boundaries. A little homework assignment for you. Pick one area in your life, and I'll give you a hint. Self-care is how we're going to take a look at that. What is one thing you can do on a regular basis for your own self-care as a healthy boundary? And I love this idea of healthy boundaries are liberating. A lot of people think that boundaries tend to give restriction, and they limit your freedom. No. As you get older, you realize boundaries actually are liberating. They give you freedom. And the freedom is to fill up your cup, to give yourself some energy, so that indeed you can function like a regular human being and not a deflated balloon all day long. So number 2, recharge your personal energy daily. Now, we've already talked about this with the idea of why you want to have healthy boundaries, but some examples. Things like yoga practice, things like exercise, things like meditation. And the list is pretty long. Now, I could have put 4 more slides of different pictures here, but you get the idea. So what do you do to stay grounded? We're in times right now where people are very, very much affected by the winds of change, getting knocked over on a regular basis. Your clientele, I'm sure, is showing that on an hourly basis. But you have got to stay strong. You have got to stay secure. And so my question to you is, what do you do to stay grounded? What techniques, what skills, what practices do you do to stay grounded? And if you don't have a practice, this is the time to adopt one. If you do have one, this is the time to continue practicing it, so that, again, this is another way to refill an empty cup. So the big talk these days is mindfulness. I'm a real big fan of the term mindfulness meditation. Basically, it's living the present moment. I think everyone knows that now. It's pretty much ubiquitous everywhere. But what you don't want to do is find yourself dipping into the past, which is associated with guilt, or the future, which is associated with anxiety and worry. So we want to be in the present moment. And so take time to stay grounded. That is the message there. Number 3 says, practice good sleep hygiene. And I can tell you right now how important this is. We're seeing a lot of people right now not getting a good night's sleep. And people who are on the front lines of healthcare with all this mental trauma going on, we definitely need you at your peak performance. And sleep is essential for that. So just to kind of review, how is your sleep wellness? You spend a third of your lives in this particular state. It ought to be excellent. Everyone's answer to this question is, my sleep is excellent. If it's not, then we got to do a course correction on that as well. So again, we spend a third of our lives sleeping, and this is part of wellness that often gets neglected and ignored. And I want to bring this to the forefront and say you need at least 8 hours of quality sleep. And the one thing we talk about in terms of sleep is, how much of your wellness program addresses sleep. Most people say 0. But how is your sleep environment? They call this your sleep hygiene. So a question is, how is your sleep hygiene in terms of noise? Have you got rid of all the noise, the barking dogs by closing your window, or the sirens, whatever the case might be? Sometimes it might be someone snoring next to you. How is the temperature? The research shows you want to have a cool temperature because you're going to sleep better that way. No light whatsoever. We should say darkness right there. But if you do see light coming in, that's going to affect your pineal gland and the production of melatonin and your sleeping surface. Now, a lot of people put a lot of attention on things like a mattress above everything else I just mentioned, and it should be that's a factor to consider, but not the only one. Don't stop there. I also am a real big fan of high thread count sheets. You spend a third of your life sleeping, you should be at nothing less than 1,000 thread count, just FYI. I know some people who have no clue about thread count, and I know some people who basically are hovering around 25 for thread count. That is torture. So treat yourself to some new bed sheets for sure. And I would also add down comforter and down pillows. Make that place nice. So we also want to say, get rid of the technology. It does not belong in the bedroom. The National Institute of Sleep says we have a huge problem with the invasion of technology in the bedroom because it now affects the production of melatonin from the pineal gland. So there's only one thing that belongs in the bedroom, and that would be the bed. And only one thing to do in the bedroom, and that's sleep. Okay, possibly two. I'll let you infer that one. Number 3 says, honor your microbiome. Now, I'm hoping everybody in the audience here knows what the microbiome is, but just to kind of review, your microbiome is your intestinal flora. And in this case here, basically, this picture is a little bit misleading because it's actually everything from your mouth to your butt. And I can see this kind of stops at your esophagus. So your mouth also is part of your microbiome. And some people say it's your skin as well. But this is basically the intestinal flora of bacteria that helps you live healthy. So I have, like this slide says, 100 trillion friends you didn't know you had. So a little bit of a review about the microbiome. The human being is a multi-species superorganism. That means that you've got more going on than just your thoughts. You got actually all kinds of bacteria, colonies of it actually, which are very, very healthy. When this ecological system is healthy, so are you. When it's compromised, so are you. And all kinds of things can compromise this. Poor eating, lots of sugar. Since the human body hosts over 10,000 microbial species, not just microbiome, bacteria, but species. So we've got a lot cooking here. Bacterial cells compromise this much of your body. I mean, over half of your body is bacteria. Who knew? And this is actually thought to be good bacteria. You don't want to get rid of this. You actually want this in your favor. Because if you don't, then you're going to have problems not just with digestion, but also your immune system, because 70% of your immune system resides in your gut. Most people don't know this, but if you are having chronic health issues, the first place you want to look is your microbiome. This is now taking a lot of attention in health circles, as it should. And we have some suggestions for some books for you to read too, in case you have more interest in this. So we also know this: a compromised microbiome is associated with inflammation. And that seems to be the buzzword right now in terms of people who've got chronic health issues. If you are one of those people, this is something you want to address in terms of self-care, is a enhanced microbiome to decrease inflammation. Okay, number 5 says the body needs good stress. And exercise basically is good stress. Exercise is the fight or flight response. So whether it's walking, whether it's swimming, whether it's jogging, something to keep your heart pumping for 20 minutes, the proverbial intensity, frequency, and duration principle. But here's the reason why I think it's so important to exercise. You help flush out the stress hormones. I'll say that again. You help flush out the stress hormones. In the course of a day, you are churning out cortisol, vasopressin, aldosterone, thyroxine, a whole slew of stress hormones, cortisol being the number 1 stress hormone of the list there, that basically slosh around your body. And if you don't do anything, basically, it not only gets you ready for fight or flight, but when that doesn't happen, because you don't move, then you now have your immune system compromised. So exercise is good stress. Exercise stresses the body and it triggers the stress response to release all these hormones and neurochemicals. But basically, once you exercise, you flush them out. We have what is known as the parasympathetic rebound effect. By the way, a compromised immune system, just to review, you should all know this, but 3 things compromise your immune system. Poor sleep, research is abundant on that, chronic stress, and poor nutrition. So how do we try and improve our immune system? I'm glad you asked. We want to get good night's sleep. We want to have a sense of inner peace, not live in a complete stress state, and we want to eat good. And eat good means to really take some time to prepare some good meals, not eat processed foods, junk foods, comfort foods. You get the idea. So, in terms of COVID, life in the time of COVID, we want to make sure we have a very strong immune system, and these are 3 things you can do to help that out. Okay, number 6 is get out in nature. We call this ecotherapy. It's a term that was coined by some therapists out in California. They realized that when they could take their clients out for strolls in the park, they actually got better results with their therapy sessions. And so you don't need to be Einstein to figure out that just to get outside and see yourself in nature puts all your problems in perspective. Now, there's all kinds of research to back this up. There's actually a new school of thought and research. It's called forest bathing, that when you actually walk through a forest, although I think it's any nature area, you get the benefit of the trees and the energy of the trees, some of the chemicals from the leaves that you breathe in that cause you to decrease your heart rate, decrease your blood pressure, and to boost your neurochemicals for oxytocin and things like that. So we talk about the importance of get out in nature, and no matter what season it is. I don't know where the body of people from this audience is listening. I think you're probably all over the country. I live in Colorado, so it's very important for all of us to get outside, even in the wintertime. But the summertime works too, and here's a picture of me feeding some hummingbirds this past month up in Estes Park. But we also taught some kids to do it too, and I tell you, to see a little boy or girl, in this case boy, but also girls, taking time to feed hummingbirds like this, it's a magical experience, and I hope that you all have that. So ecotherapy, very, very important, because we want to sync up our circadian rhythms to the natural world. We can become so distant from the natural world and the natural energies that it's problematic. And one thing I learned when I teach stress management, which I do a lot of, by the way, is that the normal breathing cycle, when someone is comfortable and relaxed, is about 12 to 14 times per minute breath cycles, and that's about the same number of times the waves hit the shore for people who are at the beach. So this idea of living in the rhythms of the planet is very, very important, and we want to kind of reconnect and recalibrate to the earth rhythms, because research shows that by not doing that, we can definitely throw off our body clock, and when that happens, all hell breaks loose. I'm a real big fan of the importance of friends, support groups. The research is really clear on this. Yeah, you got to take time for yourself, but you also realize that you're not alone. You got to actually see yourself in the company of some really good friends, and not a whole lot. Now I got a picture here of some gals who I took to, I think it was to Italy. These gals also. Oh, next one. Sorry, I thought I had 2 pictures there. Anyway, so who are your friends? Who are your core friends? Facebook has really kind of destroyed the whole idea of friendship with that word friend. But in this day and age, even with COVID, you can still meet up with a couple of people who are core friends that are there for you to support you in times of need. And sometimes it just means to have a shoulder to cry on yourself, because as therapists, we are human. So I have one more for you, actually a couple more. I'm a real big fan of the work of Joe Dispenza, and if you've not come across his work, I highly recommend you Google him and check out his books and his videos. He's got some really good workshops online that you can actually see there right now, but he is an advocate of this idea of practicing uplifting emotions. So we see a lot of people who practice the downward side of emotions, anger and fear, the 2 stress emotions, fight or flight, and all of that tends to spin off. I'm not saying those are bad, and Dispenza wouldn't say they're bad either, but they're bad if they progress longer than it takes to acknowledge that you're having a bad day. If you get stuck the negative emotions, then you've dove into the whirlpool of negativity, and that results in victimization. So make a list of your uplifting emotions. And here's a little word cloud that I had my retreat people put together last year. I said, come up with a list of these uplifting emotions, and then the ones that got more than one hit, obviously the type is bigger. But my question to you is, what uplifting emotions do you engage in? And if your answer is none, then we got to work on that, because that's not normal. The scale of emotions goes from anger to love, and you want to be somewhere in between and definitely hit the love side, that direction, on a regular basis. I think a lot of people today are not doing that. And as healthcare practitioners, as therapists, this is one of your tools for yourself that you got to use. So, by the way, I just tell you, this is a picture of my wife. We went to the Galapagos last year, and she said, my goal is to have a picture of me on the beach with a sea lion. And so, of course, we got that. But this is one of her reminders of uplifting emotion, just to give a sense of balance and mental and emotional levity, that when she sees this, it just brings her a smile to her face. Number 9, it seems like we're back to your body here, and for good reason. Stay hydrated. You know, so many people get fatigued on a regular basis, and a large part of it is because they just don't drink enough fluids. We have an expression here in Colorado: if you're thirsty, you're already dehydrated. And if you are dehydrated, you're going to start seeing mental fatigue, physical fatigue, poor decision making, poor reaction time, poor attention span, a number of things that involve poor cognition. So it's amazing how important it is to stay hydrated. And a lot of people say, oh, I drink coffee, I drink tea. That's not good enough. There's a lot of caffeine in those drinks, even some sodas, that basically you're purging the fluids that you want to be keeping in, or at least keeping in for a bit there. So make sure you get enough water. And there used to be like this thing about drink 8 glasses of water a day. Well, that really now is dependent upon how much you weigh, what your body size is and stuff. But another way to check and see if you're hydrated is check the color of your urine. You should be peeing several times a day, and if your urine is yellow, then that means basically you're not getting enough water. You want to be near clear. You don't want to be pure clear. That can be problematic too. And you sure as heck don't want to be orange, which I see some people talk about as being a problem. It is a problem. So stay hydrated is the message there. And of course, you want to have good water. So our water supply in this country is definitely questionable. I listened to Terry Gross's Fresh Air show, and she had this one person on talk about the water supply in this country and how bad it was. And of course, if you're in Flint, Michigan, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But Flint, Michigan isn't the only problem source in the country for lead in the water. It's a lot of places that have problems. And it's not just lead. It's actually a lot of hormones and antibiotics from people's medicine cabinet that get flushed down. When the water's filtered in your city or your town, basically they're filtering for bacteria and other pathogens. They're not filtering for hormones and various medicines and stuff. And so we see a lot of people who are getting water supplies that have questionable things in there. So I'm a real big fan of putting a second filter in your home, and consider the reverse osmosis as well. Take some time to learn more about water. By the way, I saw this picture and I thought to myself, you got to be kidding me. I mean, water has no calories. There's no such thing as diet water. But again, just take a look at the world we live in. And last but not least, all of the things I've mentioned would not add up to anything if you don't make time for personal self-care. So you want to take time for yourself to have these moments, to get some mental clarity, to have some physical relaxation, to get a massage, just have some personal time. Not binge watch, 5 episodes of Schitt's Creek or the repeats of Game of Thrones. Take some time for yourself. Carve this out. You're that important. And there's a wonderful book called Life's Little Instruction Booklet by Jackson Brown. And he gives a little advice tidbits to his son who went up to college. And one of them was, nobody ever said on their deathbed, gee, I wish I spent more time in the office. So that's the message about self-care. Take time for yourself, which I think is so very, very important. And it's not selfish, it's not arrogant, it's not egotistical, it is essential. So, as you may have already heard, I have a retreat I do every fall in Vail, Colorado. And because of what's going on here in the COVID land of cancellations, I've moved the retreat not so much online. I've actually put the whole thing on a flash drive. I've done some pre-recorded meditations, some wisdom circle conversations, and some a workbook with some of the journal soul search exercises, and put it all together in a packet with a flash drive and have it ready to go. So I'll have a link for that at the bottom of this as we close out this presentation. But in case you're interested, looking for a nice weekend or how you can actually kind of do a self-paced retreat on your own, we have all kinds of goodies in this retreat care package that's ready to go at the drop of a hat once you register. So just a little message about that. So that is the art of self-care. We could spend more hours, but you get the idea. And again, it's a reminder of what you already know. Take time for yourself. And the irony is, and the message is, if you don't do it, no one's going to do it for you. So taking time for yourself is crucial. It's very, very important there. Since I got some time left over, I thought I'd just give a little highlight on this. I talked to Dan, and last time we talked, he said, what do you got for topics we could do for a live presentation? I said, I can do one on creative anger management. He said, oh, please, we need this. So I didn't do it last time, but I'll do it now. So just to kind of review some things here. We have a real problem with compassion fatigue. Anybody in the healthcare industry is basically being pushed to limits. And you who are therapists and counselors, and even we probably have some coaches here, some life coaches and such, at some point, if you don't take care of yourself, you're going to start feeling a sense of victimization because the compassion is dried up. Again, you can't pour from an empty cup. So we want to address the aspects of compassion fatigue. Now here I got a nurse, but you can put your own picture there and as a therapist. And again, the wellness paradigm, you get the idea. We want to make sure we approach this aspect of emotional well-being. Of course, anger and fear are the stress emotions, and this is part of the idea about that. So these are the two stress emotions, anger and fear. Anger is a fight response, fear is a flight response. They're both healthy emotions in tiny amounts, enough to get out of harm's way and then move on with our life. But the problem is the ego. The ego says, some is good, more is better, let's hang on to this. And by hanging on, we give our power away. So I had one of my students do this in art therapy. I love this picture. That's why I keep showing it every time I give a talk on this. But I said, draw yourself when you get stressed. And she said, inside I have a tornado going through my head, but I also have blinders on. And it's true that when people are afraid, their vision definitely is their peripheral vision is definitely decreased. So as you know the story about anger, Cain killed Abel in a fit of jealous rage. And we've been living with this anger ever since. But it makes the news headlines, I don't think often enough for the right reasons, but these are just some magazine cultural literacy about the resistance we have. And of course, take a look at the headlines and you can see it's going on right now with protests and things with such. So do we have an angry culture? It's a rhetorical question. The answer is yes. I won't go through all the reasons. I got these up here, and I put some new ones up, but I thought I'd behave myself with cultural literacy tonight. But here's an example of somebody who's angry. Maybe you've seen that one before. How about this? My doctor told me to start killing people. Well, not in those words exactly. He said I had to reduce the stress in my life. Same thing, really. By the way, that's a lot of sarcasm going on there. How about this? Anybody in the audience from Oregon? I thought the people in Oregon were really nice people until I saw this one. And of course, we got New York City. I'm sure we got some therapists from New York City in there. This is probably very valid, except for that the research shows that when you do this, you just reinforce your anger. So not that good idea. So we have a whole bunch of people today who've grown up who are in what's known as the entitlement generation. Me. And it's actually a lot of me. But it's not just these kids. We've had generations of this. And if you're not aware of this term called microaggression, I just want you to be aware of this because there's a lot of it going on right now. But it basically is a term coined by Chester Pierce. A microaggression is the casual degradation of any marginalized group. The term was coined by a psychiatrist and Harvard University professor Chester Pierce in 1970 to describe the insults and dismissals he regularly witnessed by non-Black Americans toward African Americans. If you get a chance to see this movie, I highly recommend it. It's got more than just microaggressions, but there's three categories now of microaggressions. There's micro insults, micro assaults, and micro invalidations. And I'll give you some examples. It pains me to have to even do this, but I want people in the audience who've never heard of this to be aware of this. And hopefully you're not doing this, but a lot of people think they're doing this with good intentions too, which really is kind of odd. But if you were to say to a black person, boy, you don't sound like a black person, you have just done a microaggression. You just invalidated them. Or if you say, wow, you sound so educated for a black person, again, you just slap them across the metaphorical face there. If you've asked to touch their hair, that's a microaggression. There's lots of them where basically you are trying to put them down in subtle put downs, not even perhaps aware of it. But I just want you to be aware of this, that this is actually a huge problem. This is one reason why there are the protests for Black Lives Matter, because not only do you see just aggression, we also see it at this level too. Well, two books I want to bring to your attention. The first is called The Dance of Anger. Every therapist should have this on your shelf. If you don't have this, I highly recommend it. It was written about 40 years ago by Harriet Lerner. It's as germane today as it was when she wrote it, because we still have the same issues going on with women not being allowed to be angry. But there's also a book I want to share with you called Healing Rage by Ruth King. It's kind of like a little sequel or updated version of The Dance of Anger. Good sources. So if your clientele have problems with anger, I highly recommend you refer these books to them. I love this quote. It says, I was angry with my friend. I told my wrath did end. I was angry with my foe. I hid my wrath did grow. So what's the anatomy of anger? Well, we can spend all day in this slide here, but real quickly, the research shows that the average person today gets angry about 15 to 20 times per day. And I gotta tell you, when I first heard that, I thought that was kind of high, but you'll see in a moment why it's not. Also, the anatomy of anger, every time you get angry, it's because of unmet expectations. 10 times out of 10. There's different ways in which anger shows up. The obvious ones are rage and hostility, but we also have things like resentment, indignation. Did you know impatience is a form of anger? Guilt is a form of anger. Some people say fear is a form of anger. So it can show up in a lot of ways. If you take a look at all these ways in the course of a day, you can see that 15 to 20 may not be that many. Of course, you're well aware of the stages of grieving. This is the template from Kubler-Ross, and anger is number 2 right there. So you can see that when you see a lot of anger going on, a bell should go off in your head that you're seeing most likely some grieving, the death of unmet expectations. We also call this the aspects of change, and we're in times of great change right now. So put 2 and 2 together, connect the dots, and you can see why we've got so much anger going on. I heard a talk by one of my friends who's a therapist named Gloria Mogg, and she began her talk by saying anger is a healthy emotion. And I got to tell you, that grabbed my attention, because the household I grew up in, that was not the case. But what she meant was that anger is a healthy emotion because anger is a survival emotion. Now, again, this is in the terms of fight or flight, where you would display anger as a means of communicating a healthy boundary, like stop stepping on my feet, so you can actually escape to non-danger situations. So anger is a healthy emotion in tiny, tiny, tiny amounts. We could talk about the whole aspect of depression, anger. Again, we don't have time for this right now, but I am going to refer back to the common idea from Freud, I think it is, that depression is anger turned inward. I love the quote, or the joke from Stephen Wright, who says that depression is anger without the enthusiasm. So, he who angers you conquers you. Great quote. 2 more books I want to recommend. The first one's called Anger Kills by Rutger Williams. He's from Duke Medical Center, and turns out that there's a whole idea about anger and heart disease. But I want to draw your attention to this book called Make Anger Your Ally by Neil Clark Warren. If you don't recognize his name, it's because, I don't know why it's because, but actually he's the guy who formed the website called eharmony.com. He's kind of gone from this to matchmaking. But if you ever take the survey for those questions in eHarmony, over half of them deal with anger issues. And if you happen to hit a certain number of them, then basically they push send, you get back a response that says, we can't find you a match. That's code for they don't want you breeding with anybody. But in this book, Make Your Anger Your Ally, Neil Clark Warren talks about 4 different styles of mismanaged anger. And this is the most important thing I can share with you right now. There's 4 different styles of mismanaged anger. They're all bad. The first one's a somatizer. The exploder next, the self-punisher, the underhander, and you can do all of these. Okay, one person can do all of these. However, the somatizer, that's pretty much all they do. I'm going to go through these in more detail in a moment, but none of these are good. They're all bad. And if you're honest with yourself, you're going to see yourself up on the screen. You're definitely going to see your clientele up on the screen. So the somatizer. Somatizer is somebody who doesn't express their anger. They suppress their anger. The word soma means body, I think in Greek. And this is somebody whose body becomes the battlefield for the war games of the mind. The most classic example of this would be tension headaches. It could be migraine headaches. It could be TMJ. You get the idea about that. A lot of autoimmune diseases, which in the research it says the body attacks the body. So if you have somebody who's got an autoimmune disease, you might want to consider taking a look at some anger issues too, in this case, the somatizer. We call this the June Cleaver anger, mismanaged anger style, because she's always nice. We also call this a silent stone. I wrote a book called Hot Stones and Funny Bones for Teens and Stress, and it turns out that we changed the name to these to call them stones. This is a silent but deadly stone. Next one's the exploder. The exploder are almost like a volcano. These people make the headline news. They're making the headline news right now, actually. These people actually use anger as a form of intimidation. And they try and seek revenge. They try and bully is what it comes down to. So all kinds of example on TV. This is actually from the Game of Thrones, King Joffrey, a little cultural literacy here, but also on comedy shows. But even volcanoes can withdraw and then they explode again. So when you hear things like road rage and sports rage and gas pump rage and tarmac rage and stuff like that, that's all types of explosive behavior, and it's all types of bullying and intimidation. If you saw Game of Thrones, this whole TV show was based on this, if you ask me. Lots of people like that. We call this the volcanic stone. The next one is called the self-punisher. The self-punisher is somebody who denies themselves a proper outlet of anger. They've been cultured not to get angry in public, not even to themselves. So they feel guilty when they do feel angry. And as a consequence, they turn their anger and their guilt really into an obsessive compulsive behavior. So we see this with things like eating, big one, using food as a pacifier. It could also be excess sleep, excess exercise. Cutting is an example of this, or self-mutilation. Sex, you get the idea. So that's a self-punisher. And again, we have all kinds of examples of this in our cultural literacy. I love this quote. It says, "I sat with my anger long enough until she told me her name was grief." Isn't that a great meme? We call this the razor stone. This is one of my students who was a cutter drew this, and every picture she drew, she had a knife, shards of glass, and the flames. And her description of her cutting was that which was identical to the behavior of an alcoholic trying to quit. The last one is the underhander. The underhander's motto is "Don't get mad, get even." And these people try to seek revenge. This is actually an example of this. I'll give you some classic examples. Sarcasm is the most common form of underhanded behavior, where you try and seek verbal sabotage. But it could also be showing up late for meetings. It could be suing people. That's a very common one. And in the corporate world, it's known as information withholding. Lots of people in TV shows like this too. They have very sarcastic, quick wit. If you're a fan of Downton Abbey or even Glee, that guy was horrible. Glee, she had a very sarcastic tongue to her. Here as well, you get the idea. So we call this the revenge stone. So none of these are good. Oh yeah, this gal was definitely into revenge. I think that was her middle name. Every unresolved anger issue is a control issue. I'll say that again. Every unresolved anger issue is a control issue. And the irony is you're trying to control somebody else or yourself, and you're doing a horrible job with it. So we want to drop the label of these mismanaged anger styles and learn to resolve our anger. Okay, one more time. Every unresolved anger issue is a control issue, or control drama, we could say too. So just to review, anger feelings begin. In this first case, we have an explosive volcano, withdrawal, resentment, physical problems. Even volcanoes, people have that. And this kind of goes around and around. But we want to break the cycle. So we go to well-managed anger. We validate and recognize our feelings. Yes, I'm angry and I feel very upset. We evaluate them. Are they valid? And in some cases, they may not be. We exhibit control, always a good idea. We try and do some problem resolving, and then we try and come to resolution. That is the answer to that. I know it's a quick little jaunt through that. We could spend more time, but you get the idea. So real quickly, how do we creatively manage anger? A couple of ideas. Number one is know your anger style, know your mismanaged anger style. But by the way, I meant to mention you can actually be a exploder driving home from work. You can be a self-punisher when you get home. You can be an underhander back at the job. You can do all those things. Number two, learn to de-escalate your anger. You know, a proverbial expression, count to 10. Thomas Jefferson has a great quote. He goes, if you get angry, count to 10. If you get really angry, count to 100. Learn to outthink your anger. This is what I call the 12 steps of anger management. Get comfortable with all your feelings. A lot of people actually have a hard time just saying the words, I'm angry. That takes a lot of work to get to the point where you can actually say those words and feel comfortable. Plan in advance. And some things push your buttons. Know what they are. Support groups. There's my gals from Italy on an Italy trip. Stay in shape, exercise. People who are in better shape deal better with anger than those who don't. The research shows. Comic relief is very important. Don't take yourself so seriously. Problem-solving techniques are very important as well, so you don't feel like you're painted into a corner. Here's some books which I'm really, really a big fan of. These books on creativity: A Whack on the Side of the Head and A Kick in the Seat of the Pants. One more book for you. Those are by Roger Van Eck, by the way. One more book, Imagine. If you can get your hands on this, it's kind of hard to find these days, but it's a really good book. Number 9, develop realistic expectations of yourself and others. Realistic being the key here, because when they're not met, people can get angry. Number 10, turn complaints into requests. And there's a wonderful expression that says you get more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. And last but not least, practice the art of forgiveness. And here's some books on that as well. I'm a real big fan of the work of Fred Luskin. His book, Forgive for Good, research out of Stanford University. If you get a chance, I would grab that book as well. And that is the talk tonight on both self-care and creative anger management. So let me pop out of this. And I'm not sure where the camera is, but I want to say thank you for coming tonight. If you have an interest in the retreat, virtual retreat in a self-care package, then follow the link down below when we get that put up there, and we will have that for you, and you can actually check it out. So I'm seeing there's a little bit of dialogue here. I am not the most savvy with computers, and I see that we got lots of questions. Hi, Layla. I'm going to go through real quickly here. You're welcome. Thanks for coming. Katie, thanks for that. Angela, yes, walk the talk is very important, Angela. Can you repeat that name? I don't know what name you asked me to repeat, so sorry about that. And we didn't get a chance to record this. Sorry about that, too. Can we access the link for this whole live webinar? I don't know. I think so, once we get it saved. Dan, you're going to have to help me on that one. Great book, The Dance of Anger. Yes, it is. Sorry about the microaggression breathing. That was a little joke there, so I apologize, Katie. That was not appropriate. So I apologize about that. Will the slides be available? No, this is how I make my living, giving talks, so I don't have these available, but hopefully you can watch it again. And everyone else, thank you very much. Thanks for coming tonight, and we're going to call it a night, so have a great weekend. And thanks for being part of this wonderful toolkit. Thanks for all you do to make the world a better place. We definitely need you out there, and thanks. Thank you.